for you from Carla and I, and then we'll take questions from everyone else who's here today. So, Alison, in the book, you write about how you first began writing about these topics for publications like Outside, and I wondered if you could talk a little bit about like what went into the decision to write a full book about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I wrote an op-ed that was published in May of 2020. It was actually published Mother's Day weekend, which was also would have been Ahmaud Arbery's, I believe, 25th birthday. And the piece was really a reaction to him being murdered and me having, at that point, I think my son was 8 months old. And so just the gravity of now having my own child and thinking about his future and not if, but when he would be harassed by police or vigilantes, and what that would look like and feel like, and reflecting on my own experiences in running and recognizing that while I loved running, I always knew there was a difference between what it was like running as a Black woman in this country versus, a white person, and the kind of precautions that I had to take, the kind of dangers that I faced that were a result of living in a white supremacist country. So I published that op-ed and it went viral. And I started reflecting on the fact that there was no other book out there like what I had mentioned, right? Like I'd read a lot of running books and none of them talked about this piece of racism, the uncovering the history of the sport, the true history of the sport. And so I felt like if it's, I think it's Toni Morrison who may have said, if there's a story that hasn't been written, you have to write it. And so it was during the pandemic. So I was one of the privileged people who were not working outside of the house. And so I took the time to work on a book proposal. And it really was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, harder than giving birth, which was very hard. But it feels so good for the book to be out there. The book celebrated its second anniversary on Friday, and people continue to read the book. People obviously continue to be interested in the book. So I'm thankful that I really left a legacy through this book.
So since your book's released, you've really gone all in on reclaiming the outdoors around the country and even the world with your show Out and Back and your retreats in Alaska and climbing Kilimanjaro. So whether you're staying local or discovering an entirely new location, how would you say these kind of experiences have reshaped your identity as an athlete?
I first want to say, does everybody know Carla's role in my book? Carla, did you let people know?
I did. I'm going to talk a little more about it after this.
Okay, cool.
I mentioned that I went to Alaska too.
Okay, sweet. Sorry, and now repeat just the final part of the question because I got distracted.
Whether you're staying local or just discovering an entirely new location, how would you say these experiences have reshaped your identity as an athlete?
Yeah. So when I moved to Seattle 4 years ago, I really had no idea that I would become this like outdoors person. When I was in New York, I did as much as I could, right? Like it's the trails are not as accessible to us. And I think I was really committed to this idea of being a runner, being a runner was my identity. But moving to Seattle, I'm so close to so many activities in the outdoors. And I also realized that running was not always what my body wanted to do, right? Whereas before in my identity as a runner, when I didn't feel like running or when I was injured or when going through postpartum, I felt like almost like I was failing because I couldn't run. I realized that there were so many other things that I could do. There were so many other ways that I could move my body. And those were just as valid. On top of that, one of the first things that happened when I moved is somebody reached out to me who had gotten a role at Cascade PBS, the PBS station here, and asked me if I wanted to host my own TV show, which is like the wildest question I've ever gotten. And I said yes. And so then I had to think about what would my TV show be about. And I decided that I wanted to have a TV show that would help me and other people, other Black brown people discover community here in the outdoors. So it's become literally my job to find people in the outdoors, and tell their stories. So, I mean, just on Thursday, I went skateboarding for the first time, which means like the whole right side of my body is like in pain because I fell. This next Friday, I'm going foraging for the first time. I've gone fly fishing, snowboarding, skiing, horseback riding. So it's been an incredible experience because not only do I find people of color who are doing this here, I get to tell their stories and tell the history that none of these activities are actually new to us. We've been doing all of these activities in the outdoors forever. It's just the way that the outdoors is commodified and essentially sold to consumers is images of, you know, thin white men and women conquering things. So yeah, I would say that my identity now is more of somebody who loves the outdoors, and I don't have any feelings of being like competitive. In fact, I do trail races now, and I never care what my time is, but when I look, I realize that I'm often like the last person to finish. But that is not even what's important to me. It's about being outside and trying new things.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Well, you kind of mentioned, oh, sorry, I like to make sure that while I'm asking you the question.
By the way, I forget this woman's name, but she's directly in front of me and she is the cutest little girl. She came to Women of Color, Take the Lead. Yes.
Yes, she's one of our speakers today, Dominique.
Okay, yes. Hi, Dominique. How's your baby?
Kennedy
Oh
is
my
here.
God. Oh, she's here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
My son is
Came on the run on the stroller.
Yeah.
my son saw photos of her and me holding her and he got so jealous.
Oh, right, I think she's gonna come say hi.
Oh, awesome. Hi, baby.
She found some new friends, so that's where she's at.
Listen, I know what it's like.
Awesome. Well, in that last story, your last answer, you kind of talked a little bit about telling people stories, and
Yeah.
you know, the power of storytelling is a big part of what we celebrate at Read and Run. It's a big part of my work as a journalist. And in the book, sharing your experiences and the revelations you made throughout your running journey made all of these issues, big issues that you discussed, so vivid and so personal. So it's, and you know, hearing the stories of everyone who shared their stories along the run today, I think also helped us understand the bigger picture through personal stories. So I was curious, Alison, is there anything that you realized or came to see in a different light during the writing process as you kind of revisited your stories?
For me, what I realized is that the person that I am today is like the natural outcome of everything that I've gone through, right? Like in writing my story, I got to look back and think about all these moments, whether the moments that I discussed of things that I did in school or the way that my parents spoke to me at home and the history that they were telling me. And just as I looked back, everything lined up to make me who I am, right? Like there's no other version of Alison that could have been possible given the experiences that I had in my life. And that was very powerful for me to see that even as like a 7-year-old kid, I was sitting in class and questioning my teachers and correcting them about the history that I knew from, you know, my parents. And that every opportunity that I had to be disruptive and share a narrative or a story of somebody who I felt was left out, I took those opportunities. And that's really cool because again, as I was living it, there were so many times when I was completely lost or felt helpless or depressed or anxious. But I now see that all of those experiences were, you know, were part of leading me to where I am. And also now as a parent, it's really cool to see that from my son, right? Like before having a kid, I actually thought that all kids were basically the same. And then now I realize like, oh wow, like my son likes things and does things that are unique to him, right? Like not every kid is like, I don't know, dancing and singing like other kids like sports, right? So and now makes me think really intentionally about like what is my son showing me about who he is, and what are the ways that I can foster that in him, right? I'm not like while I definitely feel the urge to like vicariously live through him, and of course you want to put your kid in things that you couldn't have done, right? But I'm intentional about seeing where he really finds joy and how can I support that. And he also is really outspoken and he never holds back. And I recognize that that's like a superpower that he has, right? Like if a teacher tells him that he's too social or that he's too loud, like I realize that the teacher doesn't realize just how much power my son has. And being social means that he's going to maybe build community and be disruptive, right? So I'm able to have a perspective based on having looked back at my life and recognize that just because society says something about you is wrong or makes people uncomfortable, it doesn't mean that that's a bad thing, right? It actually, in most cases, I think means that that's the thing you need to lean into, because society is mostly about really homogeneity and keeping the status quo.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, we have a couple more questions for Alison, but if anyone else has questions that they wanted to ask, I'm going to open it up. Yeah.
Should we have them come up here? Or?
Yeah, maybe. I know it's kind of a, yeah.
Hey, Alison.
Oh, hi. Who are you? What's up, Ian?
How we feeling?
Good. You look good.
Thank you. That's marathon training. Thank you. Listen, so when I always like to say read, but when I was listening to your book, one of the things that just blew my mind, like I love the way your book like kind of intertwined your story, your history, but then also like the greater history of Black presence in the running space, even from like conception. Like when I opened up your book and saw the timeline, that was like crazy. Like my mind exploded, right? How, when you went into writing this book, is that when you discovered a lot of this information about Black and running history, or was that something you knew going in and decided to insert that into your book? And then finally, like, how did it feel to know that we have this rich history in this sport?
That's a really good question. So some of it I knew. For example, I had learned about Ted Corbett when I was on that panel about Ted Corbett, and it was like, oh, I guess I should have Googled this guy. So some of it I knew, but a lot of it I uncovered as I was writing the book, and it came from just additional curiosities. And really, like I'm always thinking about history, and so two things in my mind came up. Two dates: 1896, which for whatever reason, like I always knew that was the first modern Olympics. And I also knew that was the year of Plessy versus Ferguson, which was the Supreme Court decision that led to segregation in this country, right? And I just couldn't, my mind couldn't put those two things together, right? Because the modern Olympics is a way of it's talked about as a thing that makes us so progressive and so, worldly, and then on the other hand, this thing that is so regressive. So I was like, how are these two things existing at the same time? And then the other date that stuck out to me was 1963, which I knew was the date of Martin Luther King, March on Washington. And I also knew that was the year of, what's the guy's name? Bill Bowerman called people to Hayward Field, and many people marked that as the beginning of running history. And once again, I just couldn't, I was like, okay, these white people moving freely in Oregon and moving their bodies. And then at the same time, Black people marching on Washington because they can't drink from the same water fountain or enter the front door. So things like that just blew my mind. And so then I wanted to look more closely at that history. And for example, learning that the Boston Marathon was, I forget the date of the Boston Marathon, but the first Boston Marathon was happening during segregation in this country, right? So then I started going back and looking at all these dates and putting them together. And it actually started it made a lot more sense why the running industry and community is the way that it is, right? Because the running industry and community reflects the greater society, right? While people think of running as like a safe haven, and this is like, you know, where I go to get away, there's no getting away from oppression, right? Like all of that, everything that exists within society exists within our sport. In fact, it's a microcosm and reflects. So yeah, I just got really, really in a nerdy way excited about all of this. And I knew that I wanted it to be the first thing that people saw when they read my book. I wanted people to be like, what? Like, to your point, like my mind is blown, one, at how racist this country is. But then also at the same time that people like Ted Corbett and the Pioneer Club were creating our sport, right? So like, despite all of this, we still were doing the work to build something, which of course is, you know, the history of the world. So yeah, I mean, and I, one day I hope that this, I know that like in New York Roadrunners, for example, there's a timeline of the sport, but I hope that this timeline from my book can be found on walls, like in history books. Like, I think it's a way of not only understanding running history, but understanding the history of this country and how such conflicting ideals can exist. Like right now, if I were building on a timeline, the fact that there are all these amazing things happening in our sport, but then also like trans people aren't allowed to play sports. Like it, you know, I mean, already people are looking at this like, make it make sense. But 50 years from now, people are going to be like, what? Like, there was a time when just because of your gender identity, like you couldn't play a sport. So that's my hope.
Love that. Well, thank you for opening my eyes and our eyes to that rich history. It was beautiful to watch, to look at it and hear from you.
You're welcome, Ian. Good to see you.
It just made me think of it while she was talking. You and Ian just had me thinking about something. You was talking about you outside. So I ran my first Ocean Marathon last year, and it was like downstate Illinois, and it was 100 people total, 50 in the 50 mile, 50 in the 50K. I was the only black person there, but it didn't feel like it was not inclusive. It's just the only way I knew I was the only black person there because I was the only black person there. And so, like, you know, sometimes you get in these rooms, you go out of town, like some you outside, you feel out of your element. Sometimes you feel like the otherness of it, but it felt inclusive, and that's the only time I've been in that environment, and I loved it. Like I loved it. So you've been outside since you wrote the book, and I follow you on social media, so I see that you've been in these different environments. How do you feel about the trail and the ultra type of? Have you run into this type of issue where it feels different than road running, or feel different than just society as a whole? Like, do you see the disconnect there, or what do you think it is? I'm asking because you've been around more.
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing that I want to say is the very fact that you were the only Black person, to me, is an issue, right? Like, that doesn't mean that the people are bad or that the race is bad. And to your point, like I find myself in that position a lot of times, and people are so nice. In fact, people are wearing shirts that say like, I'm anti-racist, right? But the issue is greater than whether people are good or bad. The issue is about the systemic reasons why we're not in those spaces, right? Like, what are the obstacles that prevent us from being there? And that has to do with access to these spaces. It has to do with the amount of money. It has to do with historical trauma and fears of being in those spaces, right? So yeah, it's great. Like, I often, I haven't had any recent bad encounters in the outdoors, but I do reflect on, like, why am I the only one here? Like, what are the reasons that other people aren't here? And what are the ways that we can address the system, right? It's not just on a micro level of like, who's a good person, like what does their website say? It's like, how can we shift resources in this country towards programs like there's a rail to trail, or I forget the name of it, but there's this I forget the name of it, but there's a proposal to essentially provide greater access to the trails for people living in urban areas. Right? Like, imagine if kids in inner city Chicago, if kids could access, and I don't know anything about Illinois, so I don't know where the trails are, but like, I know that there's certainly not next to the inner city, right? So those are not kids who are getting access to being outdoors in that way. So those are not kids who are gonna inherently grow up and decide to do trail and ultra marathons. So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it is that I would say that right now there's a quote unquote boom in trail running because white women are suddenly doing better and having more opportunities, but that boom has not translated to Black people specifically. I won't say people of color because there are like quite a few. Oh, you guys are frozen.
Oh,
You just froze
Okay.
for about a minute. But
okay,
you're back.
now we're back.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'll say specifically for Black people because there are a good amount of Asian and white Latinx people in trail running that are getting opportunities that Black people aren't. But yeah, I think the problem, like with trail and ultra running, they're not even ready to talk about this. Like you say anything about the systemic racism in trail and ultra running, they all like throw their hands up and they say, "What are you talking about? Like we're the nicest people. We're so welcoming. You're so welcoming, and yet all of these races only have one or two Black people." Like that clearly, like either you're not that welcoming or being welcoming isn't the issue, right? Like the issue is systemic. It's not about you being a nice person. And I think that's where people get really confused. Like when I talk about this stuff, like there are a lot of racist people who I'm sure are good people, right? But they're upholding systems of oppression. That's the problem. It's not that like you're gonna say good morning to me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Probably have time for one more.
Hi, Alison.
Hello.
Thank you for writing that book. I
Yeah.
must admit, I haven't read it yet, but
There's still time.
it's exciting. It's exciting. I was telling the group today about Rainbow Runners, and when I started back in 1980, it was just a few of us out there at the races. But over the years, the participation has grown. And just last week at the Chicago Marathon, we had maybe about 50 runners just from our group. Yeah, so it's growing up. So running
That's
black,
awesome.
running wild black, it's a big thing right now. And I'm so proud of all the, especially the Black women that have stepped up and started running and actually doing marathon. Marathon is one of those sports where if you don't put in the training, it could be a long 26 miles.
You pay the price.
Yeah, you pay the price. That's a lot of guys. And I know you're familiar with Tony Reed. Tony Reed put our Rainbow Runners in the Black Marathoners Hall of Fame.
Oh, amazing.
Based on the growth and leadership and just, my fun of being in races.
That's
and going
awesome.
back to being the only one there, I never thought about it either. It was just a fun thing. I met a lot of great people. Still got a lot of great friends. That was some of my best supporters and some, they encouraged me to stay into the running and made it fun. Made it fun. But again, thanks for writing that book.
You're welcome.
Make it my thing to read it in depth and get back to you.
Awesome. And congratulations on such an incredible group.
That is exciting too. So
yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Great to meet you.
Okay. I think we're just about out of time on questions, but like before we close this out, we want to get a group photo with you in it. So,
so we're just gonna move the screen, and you won't see us, but everybody will. I'll tell you when to smile.
Okay, cool.
Okay, I'm gonna take this off. Okay, I'm still gonna do it full screen. Okay, so if I could have, maybe for lighting purposes, could I have all of you guys over here? Yeah, that'll look better. Okay. Okay, do you want to hold it, and then we can, just like we did the first photo, get real tight.
Make sure you send me this photo. This is hilarious. I love it.
Right? Right?
Behind you. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay, and then do like one and then one video of us saying
Who got the book?
Yay,
Who got the
Allison.
book?
Oh
All right, everybody ready?
Yeah.
Ready?
1, 2, 3.
It froze. Huh?
There it goes. All right, let me do a couple more. 1, 2, 3. Maybe one more this way, and then I'm gonna do the video. All right. Well. All right, everybody.
Should we say hi, Allison?
Hey, Allison.
Thank you so much, Allison. Really grateful
Thank
for your
you.
time.
Yeah, you got plenty of company now, Allison.
I know. I gotta,
And
I gotta
I'll
make
send you
my
all
way
the
back.
videos.
Thanks, Allison. Have a good
Bye, Carla. Thank you guys. Thank you so much. Bye, bye. Bye, Cindy. Bye, Allison.